I was standing in my childhood home, trembling as I held the DNA test results in my hands. 99.99% match. The little boy I had just seen at my sister's anniversary party, the child she claimed to have adopted 2 years ago, was mine. My son. The baby they told me had died during childbirth. My mother stood across from me, her face twisted with rage, and my father's hand was already reaching for his phone, probably calling his lawyer. But I didn't care anymore. I threw the papers onto the mahogany table between us and said the words I had been too afraid to speak for 26 years. You stole my child, and now I'm going to bury you. Before we dive deeper into this nightmare, if you're enjoying the story of justice and redemption, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me what you would do in Sarah's situation. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more stories like this. Now let me take you back to where it all began. 2 years earlier, I had been a different person entirely. At 24, I was still living under my parents' roof, still seeking their approval for every decision I made, still believing that family meant unconditional love. Eleanor and David Miller were pillars of our community. My father owned the largest real estate development company in the state, and my mother sat on the boards of 3 charitable organizations. To the outside world, we were the perfect family. Behind closed doors, I was invisible unless I was useful. My younger sister Rebecca had always been the golden child. She was 2 years younger than me, but you would never know it from the way our parents treated her. She got the better bedroom, the nicer car, the college fund that never seemed to run out. I got the leftovers and the lectures about being more like her. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself that if I just worked hard enough, proved myself worthy enough, they would finally see me. Then I met Daniel. He was a musician, passionate and kind. Everything my parents despised. They called him a deadbeat, a distraction, someone beneath our family's status. When I got pregnant at 23, I thought maybe this was my chance to finally build something that was truly mine. A family where I would be valued, where I would matter. Daniel and I were planning to move in together to start fresh somewhere far away from my parents' shadow. But 2 months into my pregnancy, Daniel died in a car accident. A drunk driver ran a red light and took him from me in seconds. I was devastated, lost, and suddenly more dependent on my parents than ever. They took me back in with what I thought was compassion. My mother held me while I cried and promised me that everything would be okay. My father assured me that they would take care of me and the baby. I was so grateful, so desperate for their love, that I didn't see the trap closing around me. The pregnancy was difficult. I was sick, constantly exhausted, and emotionally broken. My parents controlled everything. They chose my doctor, a family friend named Dr. Patricia Hernandez. They drove me to every appointment. They made decisions about my prenatal care without consulting me. When I tried to assert myself, my mother would remind me how lucky I was to have their support. How many unwed mothers ended up homeless and alone. I swallowed my objections and convinced myself they knew best. Rebecca visited often during those months, always with that perfectly practiced sympathetic smile. She would pat my growing belly and say things like, "I hope you know how hard this is going to be raising a child alone. Mom and Dad are saints for helping you." She never asked how I was feeling, never offered genuine support. Everything was a reminder of how much I owed them, how inadequate I was. The night I went into labor was when everything changed, though I didn't know it yet. The contractions started around 9 in the evening. My mother drove me to the hospital with unusual speed, barely speaking during the drive. I remember her making a phone call in the parking lot before we went inside, her voice low and urgent, but I was in too much pain to pay attention to the words. Dr. Hernandez was already waiting for us. The labor was long and agonizing, stretching through the night and into the next morning. I begged for my mother to hold my hand to tell me I was doing well, but she stood near the door with my father, whispering to each other and to the medical staff. I caught fragments of their conversations. "She won't be able to handle this. We're doing what's best." The family reputation. Think of Rebecca's future. When my son finally came, I heard him cry. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. This strong, angry wail that announced his arrival into the world. I tried to sit up, tried to see him, but the nurse, a stern woman named Brenda Kowalski, moved him away quickly. "Just need to clean him up," she said, but her eyes didn't meet mine. Dr. Hernandez was conferring with my parents in the corner. I saw my mother nod, saw money exchange hands so quickly, I thought I might have imagined it. The medications they gave me were strong, stronger than they should have been for a routine delivery. My vision blurred and the room started spinning. I fought to stay conscious, fought to demand my baby, but my tongue felt thick and useless. The last thing I remembered was my father's cold voice saying, "It's for the best, Sarah. You'll understand someday." When I woke up, the world was empty. My arms ached with the absence of the weight they should have been holding. My breasts were heavy with milk, meant for a child I would never feed. Nurse Kowalski came in her face, professionally blank, and delivered the words that shattered my universe. "I'm sorry, Miss Miller. Your baby didn't make it. He was born with severe complications. There was nothing we could do." I screamed. I thrashed against the IV lines and the thin hospital sheets. I demanded to see him, to hold his body, to say goodbye. But my mother appeared in the doorway like a ghost, her expression carved from ice. "Stop this hysteria, Sarah. You're making a scene. The baby was weak just like you. He's gone and you need to accept that and move on. This is embarrassing for the entire family." I begged her to let me see him. "I'm his mother," I sobbed. "I have the right to see my son." But she just shook her head and exchanged a glance with Nurse Kowalski. The sedative they administered after that conversation pulled me under before I could protest further. The next few days were a blur of grief and medication. I was kept in that hospital room like a prisoner. My phone was gone, taken by my mother for safekeeping, she claimed. Visitors were prohibited for my own mental health. My father stood guard outside my door, turning away anyone who tried to enter. I asked repeatedly about funeral arrangements, about where my son would be buried, about what had happened to his body. Every question was met with vague answers and increasing irritation. "You need to let this go," my father finally said on the third day. There was no body to bury. We had him cremated immediately. It was the most dignified option. The ashes have been scattered. "It's done, Sarah. You need to focus on healing now." Something felt wrong, deeply fundamentally wrong. But I was drowning in grief and drugs and exhaustion, and I had no strength left to fight. They brought me home a week after the delivery, and I found that they had already cleared out the nursery I had been preparing. All the tiny clothes I had folded with trembling hands, the stuffed animals I had collected, the crib Daniel and I had picked out together. Everything was gone, donated, or thrown away. "Your father and I thought it would be easier this way," my mother explained, as I stood in the doorway of the empty room. "No constant reminders of what you lost. You can move forward now, focus on rebuilding your life. Maybe go back to school, find a proper career. This was a setback, but it doesn't have to define you." Rebecca came to visit that first week home. She brought flowers and a small wrapped box. "For you," she said softly, pressing it into my hands. "I thought you might want something to remember him by." Inside was a tiny knitted blanket, pale blue with white trim, impossibly soft. "Mom said this was in his bassinet at the hospital," Rebecca explained. "It's the only thing they saved." I clung to that blanket like a lifeline, and I swear I could smell my baby on it. That distinct newborn scent mixed with something else, something that whispered lies beneath the surface. The months that followed were dark. I fell into a depression so deep I sometimes couldn't get out of bed for days. My parents alternated between ignoring me and berating me for my weakness. "You need to snap out of this," my father would say. "People are starting to talk." "It's been 3 months, Sarah. Life goes on." My mother was worse, her disappointment palpable in every interaction. "I raised you to be stronger than this. Do you know how humiliating it is to have friends ask about you? To have to explain that my daughter can't even cope with a simple loss. A simple loss, as if my child's death was equivalent to missing a bus or losing a job. But I had been conditioned my entire life to doubt myself, to believe that my feelings were wrong, excessive, inappropriate. So I tried to do what they wanted. I went through the motions of living. I got a job at a coffee shop downtown, something my father called beneath us, but tolerated because at least I was out of the house. I saw a therapist. My mother chose a woman who spent more time telling me to move on than helping me process my grief. But I never forgot. Every night I held that blue blanket and cried. Every night I whispered to my lost son, told him about his father, promised him that I had wanted him desperately. And every night a small voice in the back of my mind whispered that something was wrong with the story I had been told. 2 years passed in this half-life. I had stopped crying every day, but the emptiness never left. I had stopped asking questions because no one would answer them. I had learned to smile when expected, to nod when my parents made plans for my future that I had no interest in, to pretend that I was healing when inside I was still bleeding. Then came Rebecca's second wedding anniversary party. She had married Kevin Zhao, a corporate lawyer from a respectable family, in a lavish ceremony 18 months after my son's death. I had been expected to attend to smile through the whole thing, to pretend I was happy for her. The anniversary party was no different. My parents insisted I come dress appropriately and behave myself. "It's time you started participating in family events again," my mother said. "People are beginning to think you're unstable." So I went. I put on the dress my mother had picked out, styled my hair the way she liked, and drove to my parents' estate where the party was being held. The house was full of their wealthy friends, people who had known me since childhood, and now looked at me with pity or disdain. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, accepting hollow condolences and well wishes for my recovery. I was standing near the French doors leading to the garden, contemplating escape, when Rebecca emerged from the house. And she wasn't alone. She was holding the hand of a little boy, maybe 2 years old, with dark curly hair and eyes that I knew. Eyes I had seen in my mirror every day of my life. Eyes identical to my own. The world stopped. The ambient noise of the party faded into a dull roar. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't move. The child looked up at Rebecca with adoration, calling her Mama, in a voice that pierced through my chest like a blade. She scooped him up onto her hip, laughing, and that's when she saw me. Her face went pale, her eyes widening in something that looked like fear and guilt mixed together. Our mother appeared beside her immediately, as if she had been waiting for this exact moment. "Sarah," she said sharply, drawing the attention of several nearby guests, "I see you've met Eli, Rebecca and Kevin's adopted son. Isn't he precious? They've been meaning to introduce you properly." Adopted. The word echoed in my skull. I moved forward without conscious thought, my legs carrying me across the stone patio, until I was standing directly in front of them. The child Eli looked at me with curious, intelligent eyes. The same shade of amber brown as Daniel's. The same slightly upturned nose I saw in every childhood photo of myself. The same dimple in his left cheek that my father had, the one genetic marker that had skipped Rebecca entirely. "What's your name?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The little boy grinned, delighted by the attention. "Eli," he announced proudly. "I'm two." My hand reached out without permission, touching his soft cheek. He didn't pull away, just studied me with that unnerving familiarity. "When were you adopted?" I asked Rebecca, my eyes never leaving Eli's face. My sister's arms tightened around him protectively. 2 years ago," she said, her voice tight. "Right after he was born. It was a private adoption, very straightforward. 2 years ago, the same time my son had allegedly died." I looked up at Rebecca, really looked at her, and saw the truth written in every tense line of her body. My mother stepped between us, her hand gripping my elbow hard enough to bruise. "Sarah, you're making a scene," she hissed. "This is Rebecca's party. Don't ruin it with one of your episodes." But I couldn't look away from Eli. Couldn't stop cataloging every familiar feature, every gesture that reminded me of Daniel, of myself, of my family. This child was Miller blood. I would have staked my life on it. "When was he born?" I asked, my voice stronger now. "What's his birthday?" Rebecca's hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "November 15th, she finally said. I had gone into labor on November 14th. My son had been born in the early hours of November 15th. "I need to see his birth certificate," I said. My mother's grip tightened painfully. "Absolutely not," she said. "Sarah, you're being ridiculous. This is insulting to your sister. I think you should leave." The party had gone quiet around us. Guests were staring, whispering. My father appeared, his face thunderous. "Sarah," he said in that voice that had cowed me my entire life, "this is inappropriate. You will apologize to your sister and leave immediately, or I will have security escort you out." For the first time in my life, I didn't obey. I looked at my father, at my mother, at Rebecca, holding that little boy who had my eyes, and I understood. They hadn't just let me believe my son was dead. They had stolen him. They had given my child to my sister and told me he was gone forever. The grief I had carried for 2 years transformed in an instant into rage so pure it burned away 26 years of conditioning. I didn't make a scene, not then. I nodded slowly, carefully, and stepped back. "I'm sorry," I said, the words tasting like ash. "You're right, I should go." I turned and walked away, feeling their eyes on my back, hearing Rebecca's shaky sigh of relief. But I wasn't leaving defeated. I was leaving to plan. The drive home was a blur. My hands shook on the steering wheel as pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. The private hospital room, the heavy sedation, the cremation with no body to view. My mother's insistence that I move on. Rebecca's sudden adoption of a newborn, right when she and Kevin had just gotten married. Even the timing made sense now. Rebecca had been desperate for a child, and my parents had been desperate to erase the embarrassment of my situation. So they had found a solution that served everyone except me. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I went through everything I had saved from the hospital stay: discharge papers, prescription bottles, and the blue blanket Rebecca had given me, the one she claimed had been in my baby's bassinet. I held it to my nose and breathed deep, and underneath the general baby smell was something else: a faint trace of Rebecca's signature perfume. The next morning, I started making calls. I needed help, real help, and I needed someone who wouldn't be intimidated by my family's money and influence. After a dozen referrals, I found Ben Carter, a private investigator who specialized in family law cases. His office was in a rundown strip mall, an hour outside the city, far from my parents' sphere of influence. Ben was in his mid-40s, graying at the temples, with the kind of weathered face that suggested he had seen humanity at its worst and wasn't impressed. I sat across from him in his cluttered office and told him everything. He listened without interrupting, taking notes in a worn leather notebook. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and studied me. "This is going to be ugly," he said bluntly. "If what you're saying is true, we're talking about conspiracy to commit fraud, falsification of medical records, possibly kidnapping. Your parents are powerful people. They'll fight back hard, and they'll come after you with everything they have. Are you sure you want to do this?" I pulled the blue blanket from my bag and placed it on his desk. "This smells like my sister's perfume," I said. "She told me it was in my son's hospital bassinet, but I think she was lying. I think she's had this blanket around Eli since he was born. Can you test it for DNA?" Ben picked up the blanket, examining it carefully. "If there's any biological material on here, saliva, skin cells, anything, we can try. But the chain of custody is compromised since it's been in your possession. It might not be admissible in court. We need something more concrete." "I can get something concrete," I said. "My sister invited me to dinner next week. She probably thinks I bought the adoption story. I can get a sample from Eli directly." "And your DNA?" Ben asked. "We'll need a comparison sample." I pulled a small plastic bag from my purse. I had spent the morning researching DNA collection. Inside the bag was a cotton swab I had used to scrape cells from inside my cheek. "I did it this morning," I said. "Is this enough?" Ben took the bag, a slight smile crossing his face. "You've been doing your homework." "Good. We'll need to establish a timeline. Get copies of medical records, financial transactions, anything that might show a pattern. Do you have access to any of your parents' files?" I shook my head. "They keep everything locked down. My mother has a home office, but it's always secured. My father's business records are at his company headquarters. But I remembered something else. The hospital. Dr. Hernandez works there. The nurses who were there that night. Would their records show anything?" "Medical records are protected, but they're not impossible to access," Ben said. "Especially if we can find someone who is uncomfortable with what happened. People have consciences, Miss Miller. Sometimes they talk when they're given the opportunity." He stood up and extended his hand. "I'll take your case. My retainer is $5,000. After that, we'll work out a payment plan based on what you can afford." I nodded. The money would wipe out most of my savings, the little I had managed to hide from my parents' control, but it was worth it. "Thank you," I said, shaking his hand. "I need to know the truth, even if it destroys everything." He held my gaze steadily. "The truth usually does destroy things, Miss Miller. That's what makes it so dangerous. Are you prepared for that?" For the first time in 2 years, I felt something other than grief. I felt determination. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." The dinner at Rebecca's house the following week was surreal. She and Kevin lived in a beautiful colonial in the suburbs, the kind of home that screamed young professional success. Rebecca greeted me at the door with a hug that felt forced, her voice overly bright as she ushered me inside. Kevin was polite but distant, and I wondered what story my family had told him about me. The unstable sister, the one who couldn't handle her own loss and had to invent conspiracy theories to cope. Eli was playing in the living room when we entered building towers with colorful blocks. He looked up when I came in and smiled, that same smile that had haunted me since the anniversary party. "Hi," he said shyly. I crouched down to his level, my heart hammering. "Hi, Eli," I said softly. "Can I play blocks with you?" He nodded enthusiastically, already forgetting his shyness in favor of showing me his creation. We played for 20 minutes while Rebecca prepared dinner and Kevin opened wine. I memorized every detail of him, the way he concentrated with his tongue poking out slightly, the dimple that flashed when he laughed, the the way he said certain words with Daniel's inflection, as if genetics could carry speech patterns. When it was time to wash up for dinner, Rebecca called Eli to the bathroom. I followed, offering to help. She hesitated, then nodded, probably thinking it was good for me to bond with my nephew. While Rebecca ran the water, I knelt beside Eli and pretended to inspect his hands. So many germs, I teased gently, making him giggle. In the chaos of washing and drying and tickling, I managed to retrieve the child's toothbrush from the holder, slipping it into my jacket pocket, while Rebecca's back was turned. The rest of the dinner passed in a haze. I smiled and nodded and said all the right things, while guilt and triumph warred inside me. I was lying to my sister, stealing from her home, but she had stolen my child first. Whatever happened next, I couldn't let myself forget that. Ben sent the samples to a reputable DNA testing lab, paying extra for expedited processing, an ironclad chain of custody documentation. The waiting period was agony. Every day I went to work, served coffee, came home to my tiny apartment, and waited for the phone to ring. My parents called twice during that week, my mother's voice sharp with suspicion. "Rebecca mentioned you visited for dinner," she said. "She said you were very interested in Eli. I hope you're not going to make this difficult, Sarah. He's happy where he is. You need to respect that." "I'm just trying to be a good aunt," I lied smoothly, surprised by how easily the deception came. "Rebecca is family. Eli is family. I should be part of his life, shouldn't I?" My mother was silent for a long moment before agreeing reluctantly. "Just remember your place," she finally said. The results came back 9 days after I had submitted the samples. Ben called me at work, his voice carefully neutral. "Can you come to my office? I need to show you something." I told my manager I had a family emergency and drove with my heart in my throat. The envelope was sitting on Ben's desk when I arrived. He gestured for me to sit, then slid it across to me. "Before you open this," he said, "I need you to understand what it means. If these results confirm what you suspect, your entire life is going to change. Your family will become your enemy. Your sister will hate you. Your parents will try to destroy you. The legal battle will be long, expensive, and brutal. Once you open this, there's no going back to pretending everything is fine." I picked up the envelope without hesitation. "I stopped pretending everything was fine 2 years ago," I said. "I just didn't know what I was pretending about." The report was technical, full of genetic markers and probability calculations, but the summary was crystal clear. The probability of maternity between Sarah Miller and the child known as Eli Zhao is 99.99%. Conclusive positive match. I read it 3 times, the words blurring as tears filled my eyes. "He's mine," I whispered. "They took my baby and they gave him to Rebecca, and they let me think he was dead. How could they do that? How could anyone do that?" Ben's expression was grim. "Money and reputation make people do terrible things, Miss Miller. Your parents saw a problem and they solved it in the way that benefited them most. Your grief was acceptable collateral damage. Now we need to decide how to proceed. We can go to the police directly, or we can confront your family privately first and see if they'll surrender custody without a fight." I looked down at the DNA results, at the scientific proof that I was Eli's mother, and I felt something shift inside me, something hard and cold and unbreakable settling into place where grief used to live. "I want them to pay," I said quietly. "Not just give him back. I want them to face consequences for what they did, to me, to my son, to all the time we lost." "Then we need more evidence," Ben said. "DNA proves he's your biological child, but your parents will argue the adoption was legal and done in Eli's best interest. We need to prove fraud, prove the conspiracy. That means finding people who were involved and convincing them to talk." He pulled out a file and opened it. "I've been doing some digging into the hospital staff from that night. Nurse Brenda Kowalski, the one who took your baby, she's still working at the same hospital. But she's had financial troubles recently. Filed for bankruptcy last year. People in debt can sometimes be motivated to tell the truth if the price is right." "You want to pay her off," I said. Ben shook his head. "I want to offer her immunity. If she was part of a conspiracy, she committed a crime. But if she testifies about what really happened, if she provides evidence of your parents' involvement, the DA might be willing to make a deal. People who feel guilty sometimes want to confess. They just need someone to give them permission." Over the next 2 weeks, Ben worked his contacts in law enforcement, while I gathered every piece of documentation I could find. I searched through old emails and text messages, looking for anything that might demonstrate my parents' planning. I found very little. They had been careful communicating in person or over phone calls that left no trail. But I did find financial records from my father's business accounts pulled from statements I had access to when I briefly worked at his company. There was a payment to Dr. Hernandez 2 days before my due date, $50,000 marked as consulting fees. Another payment to Nurse Kowalski, $25,000, same description. Consulting fees for what Ben asked when I showed him. My father's company develops real estate. Why would he be paying a doctor and a nurse? It's payoff money, I said. He was making sure they'd go along with whatever plan my mother concocted. Ben interviewed Brenda Kowalski 3 times before she finally broke. According to Ben, she had been carrying the guilt for 2 years, and when he presented her with evidence of the payments and offered her a chance to make things right in exchange for immunity, she collapsed. She confessed to everything, confirmed that my mother and Dr. Hernandez had arranged the entire scheme weeks in advance, confirmed that my baby had been healthy and perfect, that there were no complications, confirmed that she had falsified the medical records to indicate fetal distress and neonatal death, while my son was quietly transferred to a private room where Rebecca waited. We have enough, Ben told me when he presented Brenda's signed affidavit. Between the DNA results, the financial records, and her testimony, we can file charges. But I'm going to advise you one more time to think carefully about this. Once we start this process, your family's going to come at you with everything. They'll claim you're mentally unstable. They'll say you're making false accusations out of spite. They'll drag your name through the mud. Are you absolutely certain you want to do this? I thought about Eli, about 2 years of his life that I had missed. His first smile, his first word, his first steps, all stolen from me so my parents could maintain their perfect family image and give my sister the child she wanted. Yes, I said firmly. File the charges. Contact Child Protective Services. Do whatever needs to be done. I want my son back, and I want them to answer for what they did. The next day, Ben submitted our evidence package to the district attorney's office and filed a formal complaint with Child Protective Services. He also sent courtesy copies to Kevin Zhao's law firm and to my parents' family attorney. The goal was to hit them from all sides at once, giving them no time to coordinate their defenses or destroy evidence. I didn't hear anything for 2 days. Then my phone exploded. 17 missed calls from my mother, 8 from my father, 12 from Rebecca, dozens of text messages ranging from angry to threatening to pleading. I ignored all of them and waited. Ben had advised me not to engage until we knew how they were going to respond legally. On the 3rd day, my father showed up at my apartment. I saw him through the peephole, looking older than I remembered, his face haggard. I considered not answering, but curiosity won. I opened the door but left the chain lock engaged. "What do you want?" I said flatly. "To talk sense into you before you destroy this family," he said. "Sarah, I know you're hurt and I know you don't understand the decisions we made, but we did what we thought was best for everyone. You weren't ready to be a mother. Rebecca and Kevin could provide that boy with a stable life opportunities, a real family. That boy," I repeated slowly, "has a name, Eli, and he's my son. You let me grieve a living child for 2 years. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" My father's jaw tightened. "You were falling apart, Sarah. You were a mess. We made an executive decision to give the child to someone who could actually raise him properly. Rebecca loves him. He's thriving. If you tear him away from the only parents he's ever known, you'll traumatize him. Is that what you want? To hurt an innocent child because of your selfish need for revenge?" The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost fell for it. Almost. Then I remembered the DNA results, the falsified medical records, the conspiracy that had robbed me of everything. "I'm not doing this for revenge," I said. "I'm doing it because he's mine. Because I have rights that you violated. Because what you did was criminal. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows it." My father's expression hardened. "If you pursue this, you'll have nothing. I'll cut you off completely. No more apartment, no more trust fund access, no more family support. You'll be alone, Sarah. Is that really what you want?" I smiled, and it felt like the first genuine smile I had managed in years. "I've been alone my whole life, Dad. You just made sure I didn't realize it until now. Now leave my apartment before I call the police." He left, but not before delivering one final threat. "Your mother and I have resources you can't imagine. We will bury you if you keep pushing this. Don't say we didn't warn you." The formal custody battle began 2 weeks later. My parents had hired the most expensive family law firm in the state. They filed counterclaims asserting that the adoption had been legal and done with my implied consent during a time when I was mentally incompetent due to postpartum depression. They produced a psychiatrist who claimed I had exhibited signs of psychosis after the birth. They submitted testimony from friends and family members, describing me as unstable and potentially dangerous. It was brutal. Every mistake I had ever made, every moment of weakness, every tear I had cried was weaponized against me. They painted a picture of a woman so broken by grief that she had invented an elaborate conspiracy theory, rather than face the truth that her child had died. The media picked up the story. Miller family dynasty in turmoil. Daughter claims parents stole her child. I became a public spectacle. But Ben and the prosecution were ready. They submitted Brenda Kowalski's testimony. They brought in Dr. Hernandez, who initially denied everything but cracked under cross-examination when faced with the financial records. They traced the money my father had paid, showed the timeline of how Rebecca had suddenly announced an adoption with almost no advance notice. They demonstrated that there was no death certificate for my son, no cremation records, nothing to support the story my parents had told. Rebecca was the wild card. During her deposition, she broke down completely. She admitted she had known the baby was mine. She admitted my mother had approached her months before the birth with the proposal, claimed she had believed it was for the best that I wasn't ready to be a mother, that she could give the child everything I couldn't. She cried and apologized and begged for understanding. I felt nothing watching her fall apart. This was the sister who had watched me grieve, who had held my hand at what I thought was my son's memorial, who had let me suffer for 2 years while she played mother to my child. She was as guilty as our parents, and her tears changed nothing. The custody hearing itself was held in a closed courtroom to protect Eli's privacy. I sat across from my parents for the first time since my father's visit to my apartment. My mother wouldn't look at me. My father stared with naked hatred. Rebecca sat beside Kevin, her face blotchy and swollen from crying. Kevin looked shell-shocked, as if he couldn't quite believe the family he had married into had committed such massive fraud. The judge was a severe woman in her 60s, named Judge Patricia Morrison. She reviewed all the evidence, methodically asked pointed questions of all parties, and interviewed Eli privately with a child psychologist present. Then she delivered her ruling. The evidence presented by Miss Miller, she said, her voice cutting through the tense silence, is overwhelming and deeply disturbing. This court finds that a conspiracy existed between Eleanor and David Miller, Dr. Patricia Hernandez, and nurse Brenda Kowalski to fraudulently represent the death of Sarah Miller's biological child and facilitate an illegal adoption by Rebecca and Kevin Zhao. While I believe Mrs. Zhao may have been manipulated by her parents, she nonetheless participated in this conspiracy by accepting a child she knew was her sister's without question or legal due process. My mother made a sound like a wounded animal. Judge Morrison continued, "Custody of the minor child will be immediately transferred to his biological mother, Sarah Miller. Supervised visitation may be arranged with Rebecca and Kevin Zhao, pending psychological evaluation, as the child has bonded with them, and abrupt separation may be traumatic. However, Eleanor and David Miller will have no contact with the child pending the outcome of criminal proceedings." I won. I actually won. Eli was coming home to me. But when they brought him into the courtroom to tell him what was happening, my heart broke all over again. He clung to Rebecca, crying, asking why he had to go with the strange lady. He didn't know me, didn't remember me. I was a stranger to him, and I had just destroyed the only world he knew. Rebecca was sobbing as she tried to comfort him, telling him it would be okay, that he would see her soon. Kevin had to physically pry her arms from around Eli. As they handed my son to me, his small body rigid with fear and confusion, I looked at my parents one final time. My mother's face was twisted with fury and disgust. "You'll never be able to give him what we could have," she hissed. "You're going to fail him just like you fail at everything." My father's eyes were cold. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "We'll appeal. We'll fight this until we have nothing left. You may have won today, but you'll never truly have him. We made sure of that." The criminal trial came 3 months later. My parents were charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, falsification of official documents, and interference with parental custody. Dr. Hernandez and Nurse Kowalski took plea deals in exchange for their testimony. Rebecca was granted immunity as a cooperating witness, though her reputation was destroyed. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The prosecution laid out the timeline methodically, showed the payments, played recordings of Brenda Kowalski's confession, demonstrated how my parents had used their wealth and influence to steal my child and cover it up. The defense tried to argue that everything had been done with noble intentions, that they had genuinely believed I was incapable of motherhood, that the adoption had been meant to protect everyone involved. The jury didn't buy it. They deliberated for 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. My father was sentenced to 8 years in prison. My mother got 6. Dr. Hernandez received 4 years and lost her medical license permanently. Nurse Kowalski received 2 years of house arrest and probation. Kevin divorced Rebecca 6 months after the trial concluded. He had been horrified by his in-laws' actions and couldn't reconcile staying married to someone who had participated in the conspiracy even peripherally. Rebecca lost custody of Eli completely in the end, though I eventually agreed to supervised visitation once every 2 weeks. She had been a victim of my parents' manipulation too in her own way, though that didn't excuse her choices. Eli's transition to living with me was harder than anything I had ever experienced. He was confused and angry, missing the parents he knew, unable to understand why everything had changed. We did intensive therapy together. I had to learn how to be his mother while he already had memories of different parents. Had to accept that I had missed 2 irreplaceable years of his life and could never get them back. Had to watch him gradually, painfully, slowly begin to accept me. It took a year before he stopped asking to go back to Rebecca's house. 18 months before he called me Mama without hesitation. 2 years before I saw him smile at me with genuine joy instead of cautious politeness. Every small victory felt enormous. Every setback threatened to crush me. But I kept going because he was mine, and I had already lost too much time with him. I also had to rebuild my own life from scratch. My parents' convictions destroyed the family reputation they had valued above everything, above truth, above love, above their own daughter's well-being. Their friends abandoned them. My father's company collapsed under the scandal. The charitable organizations my mother had chaired removed her name from every plaque and donation list. They lost everything, and I felt no sympathy. They had been willing to let me lose everything first. Turnabout was fair play. I moved to a different city somewhere my parents' shadows couldn't reach us. Got a better job, a small house with a backyard where Eli could play. Made new friends who didn't know about the trial, who saw me as just another single mother doing her best. I built the life I should have had from the beginning, the one my parents had stolen. Rebecca reached out occasionally, asking about Eli, sending birthday presents and holiday cards. I was civil but distant. She had apologized 1,000 times, claimed she regretted everything, that she had been manipulated by our parents just like I had. Maybe that was even true. But she had made her choices, and those choices had cost me 2 years with my son. I couldn't forgive that, not completely, not yet, maybe not ever. Now 3 years after the custody battle, Eli is 5 years old. He knows the truth in an age-appropriate way. He knows I'm his biological mother, that there was a mistake when he was born that separated us. But now we're together the way we should be. He doesn't fully understand yet what his grandparents did. That conversation will come later when he's old enough to process it. For now, he's just a normal kindergartner who likes dinosaurs and hates broccoli, and asked me to read him 3 stories every night before bed. Last month, I received a letter from the prison where my mother is serving her sentence. I almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single page of her neat handwriting. "You've won, Sarah," it read. "You took everything from us, our reputation, our freedom, our grandson. I hope you're satisfied. I hope it was worth destroying your family over your stubborn need to be right. You may have the child's custody, but you'll never have our blessing. You'll never have our acceptance. You'll never be the daughter we hoped you would become. You failed us, and you failed him. Remember that when you're struggling to raise him alone. Remember that we could have given him so much more." I read the letter twice, waiting to feel something. Anger, hurt, maybe even a trace of the old desperate need for her approval, but all I felt was pity. My mother was sitting in a prison cell, stripped of everything she valued, still unable to see that she had done this to herself, still unable to acknowledge that I wasn't the one who had destroyed our family. She had done that when she decided my son was a problem to be solved, rather than a person to be loved. I took the letter out to the backyard, where Eli was playing with his toy trucks in the sandbox. Watched him for a moment, this beautiful child, who had my eyes and his father's smile, who called me Mama without hesitation now, who ran to me when he was scared or hurt or happy. Then I tore up the letter and threw the pieces in the trash. I didn't need my mother's blessing. I didn't need her acceptance. I didn't need anything from her except to stay far away from my son and let us live our lives in peace. She had spent 26 years teaching me that I wasn't enough, that I would never measure up, that I should be grateful for whatever scraps of affection she chose to toss my way. It had taken losing everything and fighting for 2 years to undo that conditioning, to learn that my worth wasn't determined by her opinion of me. Standing in my backyard, watching my son play, I finally understood what I should have known all along. I didn't need to be the daughter my parents wanted. I just needed to be the mother my son deserved. And I was. Every single day I showed up for him, loved him unconditionally, protected him fiercely, put his needs before everything else, including my own comfort and my desire for vengeance. I wasn't perfect, but I was enough. More than enough. That evening, after Eli was asleep, I sat on my front porch with a cup of tea and thought about everything that had happened. The pain, the betrayal, the fight, the victory. I had lost 2 years with my son. I had lost my entire family. I had lost the version of myself that still believed in unconditional love and the inherent goodness of parents. But I had gained something too. I had gained my son back. I had gained my self-respect. I had gained the knowledge that I was strong enough to fight for what mattered even when the entire world seemed against me. Was it worth it? The question my mother posed in her letter. Was it worth destroying everything over this? I looked through the window at Eli's bedroom, at the nightlight casting soft shadows on the walls, at the stuffed animals lined up on his dresser. Yeah, I thought. It was worth it. It would have been worth 10 times the cost, 100 times, because he was mine and I was his. And no amount of money or reputation or family harmony could ever be more valuable than that truth. My parents will get out of prison eventually. They'll be old disgrace, stripped of the power they once wielded so carelessly. Maybe they'll try to reach out again. Maybe they'll attempt some reconciliation, though I doubt it. People like them rarely admit fault or seek genuine forgiveness. They'll probably spend the rest of their lives bitter and angry, convinced they were the victims of my vindictiveness, rather than architects of their own downfall. I don't care. They're not part of my story anymore. They're not part of Eli's story. We're writing our own story now, one where love isn't conditional on obedience, where family means protection instead of exploitation, where a mother's love for her child is sacred and inviolable. That's the story I want to tell him when he's older. Not the story of what was taken from us, but the story of what we built in its place. The truth is, I don't know what the future holds. Single parenthood is hard. Some days I'm exhausted and overwhelmed and afraid I'm not doing enough. Some days Eli tests my patience in ways that make me want to scream. Some days I look at other families, intact families with grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins, and I mourn what Eli lost because of my parents' choices. But then he looks at me with absolute trust and love, calls my name with pure joy, falls asleep with his hand in mine, and I know we're going to be okay. More than okay. We're going to be happy. So here's what I want you to take away from my story. If someone you love is mistreating you, if someone is stealing your joy or your dreams or your very identity to serve their own purposes, you have the right to fight back. You have the right to demand better. You have the right to burn down everything rather than live in chains. Yes, it's scary. Yes, it's hard. Yes, you might lose people you thought you couldn't live without. But you'll survive. And on the other side of that fire, you might just find yourself. I don't need my parents' acceptance. I don't need their blessing or their approval or their version of love that came with so many conditions, it stopped being love at all. I have my son. I have the truth, and I have myself. That's more than enough. That's everything. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have fought back? Or would you have let them keep your child for the sake of peace? Have you ever had to make an impossible choice between family loyalty and your own truth? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and I'd love to hear your perspective. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you think or feel or recognize something in your own life, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me share more stories like this. Stories about people who refused to be victims, who fought back against impossible odds, who chose themselves when everyone else demanded their surrender. Thank you for listening, and remember, you're worth fighting for.